Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Maraaweka. Hi, my name is David. I am a burlesque performer, a podcaster, and a fairly recent Twitch streamer. You can give me a follow. Links will be in the description and at the end of this podcast mini-let episode. There's probably a better way to say that. But anyway, I am also a member of the Comanche tribe, and Maraaweka is how you say hello in Comanche, usually to 3 or more people. I'm assuming there's at least 3 of you listening, so I decided to go with that route. Quick thing about that, there's only a handful of native Comanche speakers left. The tribe itself has been pushing to get more people actively speaking it. And so I've been taking classes, especially during COVID, and have been trying to incorporate it in my daily usage. And I incorporate it on my Twitch stream a lot. Recently, we've been playing some games going over some of the colors of Comanche in the Comanche language, which is also called Namatekwap, or the language of the people, I believe. So that's a little bit of a history lesson. Now let's go into this game that I decided to talk about. Today's game is El Shaddai, or the Ascent of the Metatron. And this game came out in 2011, and it was for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. While I was an adult when this came out, it doesn't necessarily have the nostalgia factor of some of the early Final Fantasy games or some of the early Zelda games. This game still holds like a very dear place in my heart. I'm still not sure why, although I think if you've never played it, and you do play it, I think you'll understand why. I think those of you who have played it, who like it, probably somebody out there listening who hated this game and is like, oh my God, why is this? Yeah. Anyway, so El Shaddai is based off of the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is a Hebrew ancient text that is usually not brought into, has not been brought into the Christian Bible, although it is still considered a part of the Hebrew canon, I guess it would be. I am not Jewish, and so I apologize if I am going over any of that. I am going to quickly skim over this with what little knowledge I have and try to not step on any toes. I apologize both for that and in advance. And yes, some of the imagery that we do have of Noah and the Great Flood and some of the things around that actually do not come from the book of Genesis, but come more from the book of Enoch, or at least some of the imagery that we have. I think it's a little similar to the way that a lot of the Christian ideas of hell and Satan tend to come from Milton and not from the actual Bible. So in the book of Enoch, it centers around Enoch, who is related to Noah, and he gets carried up to walk with God at a very young age, younger than most of the people in the Bible. Eventually is listed as becomes the Metatron, or the voice of God. And if you've seen Dogma, you've heard that name before. And Alan Rickman is yes, but no, but yes, but no. And then once after Enoch becomes the voice of God, he then is overseeing a case where there are angels who went to Earth to kind of guide humanity, and then kind of fell in love with human beings and decided to stay there and procreated. If you have seen the movie Noah by Darren Aronofsky, the big stone monsters, those are these angels that they were punished, but they fell and were punished, but not in the same way that we usually view Satan and his demons. They did not go to hell, they stayed on Earth. And then their children were the Nephilim, and the Nephilim are basically why God flooded the earth. Yeehaw. If you have read Jacqueline Carey's Cushiel's series, she touches on a lot of this. Her angels that come down to earth for a very different reason, but most of their names come from the names listed in the Book of Enoch as the angels who stayed, the Grigori, the Watchers. So the game El Shaddai you are playing as Enoch himself, and this seems to kind of be like after he's ascended to heaven, but before he is actually the Metatron. I think that's why it's called the Ascension of the Metatron. Go figure. But the gameplay is a little different than most games that I have done in that Enoch never really levels up. Nor like his weapons don't level up, his armor doesn't level up, I don't think his health meter levels up. It's kind of in the same way that a little bit like Mario, because you might get some power-ups here and there, but you never really have more, you don't get more lives or hearts like you do in Zelda. You don't become stronger. You're kind of the same strength throughout all the whole game. You also get weapons, usually taken from your other enemies. You have a thing called an arc or an arch, a gale, and a veil. The cool thing about those is that when you take them from the enemies, you have to consecrate them or purify them, and that usually takes some time. And then as you continue to use these weapons, they will become deconsecrated, and you have to redo it again. And sometimes it's easier to just grab one from one of the other enemies, because usually that process involves a bit of purification. It makes sense in the game, and it's not as complicated as I'm probably making it sound, but it is a little bit different. So you're always kind of had this rotating cast of weapons that you can pull from, and they're almost always in the fights that you're going through. So you don't have to go and dig through boxes, and you don't have to go through and find parts. You don't have to dodge lightning 100 times. You just grab the nearest enemy, punch him in the face, grab his shield, and you got a shield. And the shield also turns into gloves that you can punch people with. Yeah. And so each of them have their own strengths and weaknesses. So some fights you're going to want to use the veil, which is the shield, but it's really heavy. And so other fights you're going to want to use the gale, which is kind of like this weird glowy dots that surround you that shoot out little projectiles, but they also help you jump better. And then the arc is it looks like a bow, but you use it kind of like what are those things? In Star Trek, the Klingons, they use that whole thing that looks like a bow, but I'm not a Trekkie, and I'm very sorry. I have an image in my head. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is going to make no sense whatsoever. So the game itself follows Enoch. He comes down from heaven. He then is basically tasked with finding each little different god, each little different angel who has tried to set themselves up as a god on Earth, and take that angel down and lock him away into these rotating stones that kind of look like Disney's Atlantis. And there they will stay until they are one day let out in a sequel, which didn't quite really happen. So in the game, they're actually supposed to be they're going to be there forever. But I'm pretty sure if somebody's going to write a sequel, it would be, oh no, the angels got out. But there's some little things along the way. It is interesting because the flow of time of this game is very nebulous. It seems to take place in sort of almost a fantasy. I mean, it's definitely a fantasy world, but it takes place in sort of fantasy time frame. Because when Enoch first comes to Earth, he's coming down, he fights some angels, and then there's you actually watch the credits, and you have to interact with the credits. And it's the music is stunning, and there is a historical story that is going on, contextually in game, that you see happening during the credits. But I didn't really realize that until I played it again. And I don't really want to spoil anything. I think this is a very hard game to spoil because it's kind of like a Zelda game in where Enoch is going to get all the angels and put them into boxes. Link is going to find the Master Sword and kill Ganon. You kind of know what's going to happen, and and while there are twists and turns that I don't necessarily want to bring up, I think this is a little bit of a difficult game to spoil in that sense. However, yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff that I don't really want to get into because, again, I don't really want to spoil the game. This game's biggest draw, I would say, though, is its artwork and its music. The gameplay is fairly simple. It plays out like God of War. You know, it's at that third person omniscient sort of viewpoint. You go around hitting people and hitting things and hitting enemies and then moving on to the next level. But the levels are absolutely stunning. Sometimes you do switch back and forth between sort of a 3D realm and then sometimes you do a side scroller, but it's like you're walking through a painting. Kind of a little bit like in What Dreams May Come when he goes to when he goes into heaven and it is a painting. It's a little bit like that. Like the very first world you're going through almost feels like some sort of fantasy watercolor. There's other ones that, you know, you're traveling along and the sun, everything's sort of sketched out in white on a charcoal background and the sun keeps moving around at different times. It's a stunning setting that I think that is one of the things that is really the biggest draw of this game. It is a beautiful game to watch, to play. I mean, it's a fun game to play. It is also a beautiful game to watch. And beyond that, it's a beautiful game to listen to. So like you are surrounded by these stunning visuals and you are listening to this stunning music, which has a very choral sound. Like there's a lot of like epic choirs singing, but also some smaller pieces. It's very, I mean, it's definitely a very fantasy movie, and it's a little bit different from, it's both different and same from a lot of things I've ever heard. I think that's the thing with El Shaddai. It's different from anything that I've ever played, but it also reminds me of a bunch of other games that I've played. So I don't know really necessarily where to put it into a certain sort of niche. While you're going around, you run into different, there's a couple other angels that you run into. You constantly talk to Lucifer, who I'm pretty sure was supposed to be Lucifer, but they were probably like, we can't really have a game where you take orders from Lucifer and not have it be an issue, especially in an American audience. We do see the four archangels of Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. They show up as different abilities that you do kind of get a hold of, or swans that are flying over you. And yeah, like I said, the story unfolds pretty easily. Like, again, like I've said, it's not something like BioShock where you're finding out this story that just like unravels in front of you and then you get these plot twists that jump. But I think it has a lot of the beauty of, especially BioShock Infinite. I think I played this game before BioShock Infinite, and then I played BioShock Infinite, and then I was like, wow. And so these two games kind of really sit into my head together. If you've played BioShock Infinite, you know there's some stunning scenery and some stunning music. And I think this is the same, except for the fact that the scenery is a lot less realism-based. It's a lot more, not abstract, impressionist, I would say. Because you're still running through very real worlds and very real settings, but they're not meant to be a real setting. Gravity doesn't always exist. It's a little bit like in Dragon Age when you go into the Fade, although it doesn't have like the weird RuPaul's Drag Race Season 1 Vaseline lens going over it. And that's what kept drawing me back to this game. I've played it a bunch of times. I'll probably play it again. I've been kind of wanting to plug it into my Twitch stream once I figure out how to do that, because right now I've just been sticking with the Switch because I think it's a stunningly beautiful game, and I do think more people should be aware of it. Does it have the best plot? No. I also don't think it's supposed to have the best plot. It is a game you sit and you immerse yourself in the same way that most visual novels are not the greatest game, and a lot of times you're sitting there just like pressing the A button again and again and again. Don't worry about the gameplay. The game plays itself. You know how to play this game going in. Go into it and really just let yourself just sink into the stunning soundscape and visuals that this game has to offer. For those of you who are, I do think that now that we are at a PlayStation 5 and we're a couple generations out, some of those might be not as perfect as they might have once been. But I also think PlayStation 3 graphics still hold up pretty well. It's not like going from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 3. So yeah, if you can go out and get a copy, get a copy. I think it'll be well worth your time. There is, as I'm saying, there was a sequel that seemed to be hinted about with a lot of different type of concept art. And I see that there was a sequel-ish that was called The Lost Child. It's available on PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, and was intended to be released on the Switch, but I'm not sure. Actually, yeah, Wikipedia says that it's on PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch. So there's a sequel that I have not played yet. I'll probably pop it in soon. And it's called The Lost Child. It's set in the same universe, although it's set in modern-day Tokyo. So yes, go out and get this game. Check it out. Maybe if you want to get a used copy, get a used copy. But I do highly recommend El Shaddai Ascending the Metatron. So yeah, my name is David. You can follow me on Twitter at carriage_return. And you can follow me on Twitch at return_carriage. If you want to know where that's coming from, my burlesque name is Carriage Return. And I'd say you can find me somewhere with that, but honestly, I don't really have a thing set up for that. I should get that one of those days. But yeah, I hope to see you out there in the wider interwebs. And thank you very much for your time. And one of the many ways to say Comanche is Sakuka Mia. It means go in a good way. So go in a good way. Sakuka Mia. And happy gaming.
Hi, I'm Matt, aka Stormageddon, and I'm the host of CPOV Autographs at certainpov.com. It is a bi-weekly interview series where I interview folks from all over the arts, from writers to comedians to magicians to musicians, even actors, historians, podcasters, pretty much anyone who's willing to chat with me for a little bit. If you like interesting conversations with even more interesting people, go to certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, music is life, and life is good.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.